Laurence Fishburne is an awesome individual. He has such gravitas, such presence. I was very, very excited to be working with him. You know, he was extremely professional. He really, it's great when you have an actor like that within your crew, within your cast, because he sets a standard. You know, this man was in Apocalypse Now. You know, obviously this was before Matrix, but he still was such a big star for Paul and I. He'd done so many movies that we really liked, but he was really easy to work with. But one of the great things about him is you just cut to him and he's got such presence. He doesn't really have to do much. So he's worth millions of dollars just in that presence alone.
You know the rules, people. Someone drops the ball, we get the call. Now, let's go.
Fish loved the movie. That was, you know, he really, really liked it. A friend of mine met him in New York about a year and a half after he'd finished filming Event Horizon. And he was wearing his full outfit, you know, the flight suit, the Captain Miller flight suit.
I was very intimidated by working with Laurence because he's a big American film star and he's kind of very cool and charismatic, and you know, he's nominated for an Oscar, and he's, you know, he's just a brilliant actor. So the first day that I worked with him, or rather he was doing a scene, I come to visit the set and I was introduced and he shook my hand and I kind of went a little bit, and he did something. I think he walked across a room looking for something, and then he came over and stood next to me while we were watching the playback, and he went, "Do you think that was all right?" I said, "What, me?" He said, "Yeah, it was that. What do you think, that was all right?" I said, "Yeah, well, yeah, it was great, really." Anything? And I said, "Well," and then I made some comment, God only knows why, I made some vaguely critical comment about you could have gone and looked in the cupboard or something, and he went, "Okay." And he went away and I thought, what did I do? Why didn't I just tell Laurence Fishburne how to look in the cupboard? But we hit it off. We got on incredibly well. And in order not to be intimidated by his general superstardom and macho coolness, I called him Florence. And then the rest of the crew took it up. It was called Florence by a lot of people, which I think took him by surprise at first, but he took it in good stead after a while.
One of my favorite memories of Fish, though, is actually off the set. He was such a cool guy. And we set up this gym because all of the actors had to do a lot of wire work in the spacesuits. They had to be hung upside down, they were put into harnesses. And it's physically very difficult, so they had to be in very, very good shape. So we had a big gym set up at Pinewood for the actors, and they'd go in there at the end of the day. And at that point in my life, I was still trying to remain slightly fit, so I would go running at the end of the shooting day. And I went into the gym and there was just me and Fish, and his favorite exercise was to hang upside down from these gravity boots, you know, those bars that you hang upside down from. So I walk into the gym and he's hanging upside down, because usually he'd do like sit-ups upside down. He's hanging upside down like a big bat, looking really cool. He's the only guy who can hang upside down and look cool. So he's hanging upside down and he says, "Hi, Paul," and we have this conversation and we talk about this and we talk about that. And slowly he works his way around to what he really wants to say, which is he can't get up. But he's too cool just to get to the point and go, "Oh, Paul, I can't get up, give me a hand." We have to have a whole conversation first. And then eventually, because his stomach muscles were like so exhausted, and then I had to kind of help him up. But he was a great guy to work with. I hope we will work together again.
Sam Neill, also terrific, very professional. You know, we had a very social time on that film. I gave the cast membership to this new club that just opened in Soho, the Soho House, and every Friday night I would take a room there, and we would all sit around and talk, and we became friends. And Sam is still a very good friend and an excellent actor. I mean, like, Paul and I were only 29, 30 years old, so it was great to have this experience behind us.
I'd always seen Sam playing these authority figures. He plays, you know, kind of reactionary figures. He's often buttoned up and repressed, and I was rather taken aback at what kind of loose, free spirit he is, kind of embodying, I don't know about the 60s, but whatever he is, he's certainly not the characters he plays on screen. It took me a while to make the adjustment and realise he was a real laugh and incredibly mischievous. And he was there with his wife, Noriko, and they just loved to have a good time. And they were, you know, when we all went out, they were the last people to leave. And so he was one of the people that was tremendously good fun to do a scene with, because I don't think he takes acting too seriously. Not that he's not very good at it, but I think he thinks it's a rather silly way to make a living, and that comes across when you work.
One thing I can say about Sam Neill is if you've never worked with him, please keep your fingers crossed that you're going to work with him, because he is the guy. He's really quiet, very calm, you know, doesn't suffer fools. Amazing person to apply prosthetics on. I think Mark found that, because he's just there. He's so professional. And he was very nice to us, and he's got his own vineyards, and he gave us all a nice bottle of wine at the end of the film. He's a great guy. Really fantastic. Oh, and he loves watching. I mean, the makeup call was horrific. 1 o'clock in the morning, there was the makeup call. Then Sam was on set for all day, and then a couple of hours to take off the makeup in the evening. And he was just fantastic. The makeup was being applied because he had to stand there for so many hours. The Jungle Book was fantastic. He did tell us off for singing along, and kept telling us you might have to turn the film off because we were singing King of the Swingers, you know, all that. Anyway.
Sam Neill just gave so much to this movie. The end of the film, where he had to be in a full prosthetic suit, which I'm sure Pauline Fowler has told you how long it took to get into that. I mean, he would come to work, I think it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, so that they could spend 7 or 8 hours putting all of this makeup on him, all of these plastic pieces. We'd then shoot with him for about 5 hours. He'd be awake, having the stuff put on, having the stuff taken off, and have to deliver a performance. So he gave so much to the film. And also, incidentally, we were shooting this at Pinewood Studios on the Bond stage in the middle of winter. And the Bond stage is just like a big tin hut. There's no heating in there, and it's freezing cold. And Sam's naked underneath all these little plastic pieces, because he has to be. So he's like freezing his bollocks off as well, in a tremendous discomfort. And all we're doing is like ladling more and more freezing cold blood all over him.
Kathleen Quinlan, who we'd seen in The Doors, that's why we hired her. We thought she was very strong in that. Interestingly, she had a young son in real life, and her character has this child, and she'd had to leave her husband and her child in America to do this film in England, which was echoing her character in the film, who had to go into space to answer this distress call from the Event Horizon, the ship that had disappeared, 20 years earlier. So I think she brought a lot of that real life feeling into her part. I mean, I really, really think you feel for her when she's missing her child and she's feeling guilty about her child, and she very cleverly brought that in there. And I think the cast everybody has something you're guilty about. Everyone has done something horrific, and I think they all tapped into that a little bit. They didn't always tell me what it was, but I'm sure certainly they all had their dark pasts.
Kathleen Quinlan was I love the cast of this movie, so I have nothing but great things to say about them. She was terrific to work with, really so feisty, and I think some of the scariest stuff in the movie is stuff that she was involved in the medical bay.
Peters!
That's what I've learnt is the more movies I've done, really what sells the horror is what you see in somebody's eyes. That's what sells if you're doing a monster movie, that's really what sells the guy in the rubber suit. Is the monster is the person who's reacting to it. Did they really, really look scared? And I think, that's some of my favourite stuff in the movie is where Kathleen's in the medical bay, because she looks genuinely terrified.
Well, Kathleen was a bit of a, although she's hardly older than me at all, but she was a mum, and she felt like a very safe place to go to, Kathleen. She's also a magnificent actress. Because what was weird about Event Horizon is that sometimes from a standing start, people had to go into incredibly extreme emotions because they were being confronted by their worst vision of themselves or whatever, and she'd be standing around chatting, then be completely traumatised, like only a mum could be, these visions of her child running around. I just remember being terribly impressed by her. I find it easy to get bound up in the social atmosphere of work and forget that when they say action, you've got to do something extraordinary, and she reminded me all the time.
Joely Richardson, who I think, her character, as I remember, might have originally been written as a guy. I think Lieutenant Starck was originally a guy. That's one of the things that when I cast I always like to do, unless it's specific. we'll read both kind of men and women for particular roles, because sometimes it's kind of like fun to flip it around and change it.
Joely was great. I'd never really done a part like this. You know, Joely Richardson of the famous theatrical family, so she'd done a lot of sort of more dramatic orientated British films. I don't think she'd done much with guns or stunts, but she got really fit, she really embraced it, and we threw her around a lot. I mean, we just tossed her around. I mean, there's a scene at the end where the ship is breaking up and she's being sucked out and she's hanging on, and we've got, you know, big cannons blasting out air, and she was great, real trooper.
Give me your hand!
Joely would always make me laugh. I don't know why. She just makes me laugh. Almost anything she says. I'm not sure she's trying to be funny most of the time either. And she laughed rather too loudly at lots of things I was saying when I really definitely wasn't trying to be funny. I think we got on very well and have remained friendly since. You know, it's much easier to stay friendly with the English people because the Americans you don't see. She, I think, couldn't believe that she was in this science fiction film, and saying some of the stuff to her was so alien. She'd say it and turn around and go, "What am I talking about?" And then it was a rhetorical question, but I would go to the bother of explaining what, you know, various force fields and black hole and worms were, and she'd go, "I don't care."
The antennae array is completely fried. We've got no radio, no laser, no high gain. No one's coming to help us.
She looked damn good in the jumpsuit.
She brought a bit of kind of English class to the picture. I mean, that was one of the things I was very pleased about with the picture, was that Paramount allowed me to cast, you know, a cast that was drawn from around the world. You know, there wasn't an insistence that everyone had to do an American accent. They were fine that Sam Neill's character came from New Zealand, that Fishburne came from America, that Joely came from England, and everyone could have their little flags on their arm. I mean, and that, I think, gave the movie a flavour that it wouldn't have had otherwise.
Richard Jones, again, extremely handsome, compelling person to watch. You know, he'd not done much outside of America, so I think it was a real adventure for him to come to England. And you know, the trouble with you have these ensemble casts is they all get their moments, but at the end of the day, it's Laurence Fishburne and Sam Neill, and it's difficult when you're, you know, to make yourselves presence, to hold your own. But I think Richard really managed it very well. Even though his part wasn't as big as perhaps we would have liked it, he did the same with Sean Pertwee, you know, or Jason Isaacs. They each had their individual characteristics.
Richard T. Jones was a lot of fun to work with. I think this was the first time he'd really been outside of America and done a big studio movie, and he was just so overexcited every single day on set. I actually ran into his wife about 6 months ago at an airport, and she came up to me screaming, and she said, "You know, Richard and I talk about that movie. It's his favorite movie ever." And they just got married at the time, and they got to come and live in London for 6 months. I mean, he was a cool guy to work with. He didn't like being in the wire rigs. That's my memory of Richard, though. Fishburne was fine about it, but Richard just didn't like hanging around in those wire rigs.
Richard T. was he was just this larger-than-life person who came over to London to just suck us all dry of life. He had such a good time when he was here. I can't remember a time when he wasn't laughing. And then he improvised, it seemed to me, all of his lines. He was constantly saying things you think, where the hell did he get? And just because he was so ebullient, in fact, that's what he ends up being in the film. I don't think that was on the page like that. And he was embarrassingly good looking as well. There was something rather, you know, he was sort of statuesque, beautiful man. I couldn't bear to look at him.
Jack, he was like the mascot of the film, you know, this sweet guy, but great actor. You know, he'd just come off, I think, Breakdown, and again, he'd done a lot of drama, but not a movie like this, but he completely embraced it. He was really like the kind of darling of the cast.
Jack was a lot of fun to work with. He really, he was a good sport, you know, because we did some terrible things to him. You know, we hung him upside down, we stuck blood tubes, you know, around his eyes. He had so much screaming and shouting to do. You know, for all the fact that he's, you know, a bit of an icon in horror films because of his performance in Event Horizon. The guy has the most amazing singing voice and actually started out like in musical theatre. So I remember I had my birthday during the shoot, and he sung this song at my birthday. It was just fantastic. He has an amazing voice. Someone should make a musical with him. Event Horizon, the musical.
Mr. Isaacs, who has done virtually every film we've made, you know, scary. He just became a very scary doctor on the ship. And some of the stuff that we had to cut was his stuff. I mean, we built this huge prosthetic of him, and he's skinned alive, and he's hanging from the ceiling in the medical center of the ship, and he's basically dead, but he lifts his head up and he speaks. And Jason just loved all this gory stuff. I mean, he really embraced it and had a great time. And I love the scene where he, where they got the recording and they're trying to work out what it is. And of course, Jason says, "Oh, it's in Latin."
Sounds like liberate me something. I don't know. I can't make out the rest.
Liberate me.
Save me.
Which is a little bit of an on-the-nose beat, but he does it so well, you know, we get away with it. He's great. We love him.
I know Paul and Jeremy from a long time ago, the director and producer, and Jeremy Bolt and I were at university together, and when I was doing a play, I was doing Angels in America at the National Theatre, and he came to me and said, "I want you to meet a friend of mine who's directing a film. You haven't got any time to be in it, so all we can do is get you half a day, like 3 or 4 lines." And I said, "Well, I don't want to be snobby, but I think I should be, you know, playing bigger parts than that." He said, "He's a really great guy, you'll like him." And it was shopping, and the director was Paul, and we hit it off, and next time he made a movie, he came to me and asked me to be in it.
Jason and I became good friends on this movie, and we've pretty much worked together ever since. He's appeared in nearly all of my movies in one form or another, sometimes as like an uncredited cameo. You know, very serious. I had to persuade him to do the movie. He didn't immediately jump at the idea. I thought he brought an awful lot to his character. There wasn't an awful lot on the page, and he definitely brought a lot. You know, a lot of the character traits and quirks are all Jason's invention.
When I first read the script, I think I had the same reaction that most people have when they read horror film scripts, which is, I don't really get it. And it was only Paul explaining his vision to me that made it come to life, because you don't jump when you read something on a page, and you don't get a feeling of dread, and all those things come from storytelling. And more than most genres, I think a horror film, or science fiction horror film like this, is in the director's hands. So I read it and thought, I wonder what the hell this is going to be like.
The ship, do you understand? It's just a big hunk of metal. There's nothing odd going on.
DJ?
Well, I was playing a doctor, and my brother's doctor, and he's this very, professionally, he's this very grim man, very taciturn, and people are always leaning forward to hear what the hell he's talking about. And so, because DJ didn't say very much, I thought I'd be this incredibly serious, rather grave personality, and that worked, because then Laurence started flipping off me and making jokes about, you know, he kind of made fun of me as soon as I introduced myself and did it other times, but it made me also, I felt like I was maybe the rock that people came to confess. So basically I played my brother. The other thing I wanted to do was have gadgets. Since I was in a science fiction film, and maybe I wouldn't be in another one, I wanted to have things about me, and I always fancied when I was a kid having a bat utility belt. And so I asked Paul if I could have a utility waistcoat, and I got this coat with, you know, billions of strange looking implements in them. God only knows what they were meant to do, and I tried to use them in various scenes, but mostly they look rather cool, I hope. I thought so anyway.
If you watch the movie, he's got so many props, knives and belts and things and because he really got into that. And then about halfway through the movie, when he's realizing it's one thing to get all these props, but then you have to deal with them all the way through the film, he's like, "Paul, why did you allow me to have all these fucking props? You know, I've got all these things, syringes," and so that became the bane of his life, is how to deal with all of this stuff.
Paul's an incredibly collaborative guy, and he threw it open to all of us. I mean, it became much more like doing a play, really, because we went to the same set every day for a very long time, which you don't normally do on movies, because there were no locations, there were no extras ever in space. You know, nobody wanders by the window outside. We became a very tight ensemble company, and we all made contributions all the time. Mostly we made contributions to our own characters, but sometimes you make suggestions for other people, and Paul was always up for it. For instance, one of the things that we all did was come up with a kind of background and history for our characters, so they seemed like they had a full life. And I was very aware that in the story, a number of the characters have, not flashbacks, have kind of nightmare visions of whatever this ship that's been to hell does to them, and I wasn't going to get one. So I wondered, maybe they happened, but they didn't happen on screen. And for me, DJ had a vision of getting his chest ripped open because he had an operation when he was a kid. And so I gave myself a huge scar from neck to navel. And we put it on every morning. It took forever. And I don't think the audience ever got it or saw it. But I was rubbing it often in the scenes. And sure enough, when he meets his fate, DJ, he gets split open.
Sean Pertwee had the most amazing haircut done for this movie. He had his hair bleached, cut about that short, and then just bleached bottle blonde. I mean, it was like shocking platinum blonde. It's fantastic. He looked so over the top. And he came in and he said, "What do you think of the hair for the movie, Paul?" And I just looked at him, I was shocked. And he went, "Okay, I understand." And then when he came back, like half a day later, he'd had it all shaved off, and that's where his look came from. And for me, I think it's his finest performance that I've seen him deliver. I mean, he was really damn good in the movie.
Sean, who did shopping with us, he's a real lad, he's a real friend. He was like the sexy, young, fun guy. He brought in some humour. He had a great time. I mean, Sean, who loves movies like this and loves video games and loves gadgets, he was just constantly playing on the set. He was great.
Sean Pertwee and I go back to when we were teenagers, and it was just so lovely to work with him again. I've done it 3 times now, all in Paul Anderson's films. The first one was in Shopping, where I went and did just a few hours on the set really to meet Paul, but it was with Sean, who I'd known since he was at the Bristol Old Vic and I was at university there. And I remember getting there and going, "Well, what should we do about this?" And he lifted up the script, threw it away. He said, "No, it's Paul. It's all right. We can do whatever we like." And we basically improvised the whole scene. And he hasn't changed since we were 18, actually, 19, not at all. I guess we probably look older, but I look at him, he doesn't look any older to me. So it was really lovely to be people you hang around with, to go to work with them as well makes it a bonus, because you don't have to start getting funny about your territory.